Marjorie Taylor Greene lasted 1 week. 1 week of opposing Donald Trump before she quit Congress entirely. The woman who'd spent years attacking Democrats, questioning their toughness, mocking their inability to handle pressure, folded after 7 days of receiving what she'd been dishing out for years. Jasmine Crockett watched it happen. And she had thoughts. Brutal, devastating, perfectly accurate thoughts about what everyone had just witnessed. This is the story of how the attack dog became the example. On Friday, November 21st, 2025, Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene did something almost no one saw coming. She quit. Not quietly, not gracefully, but in a defiant, rambling statement that blamed everyone except herself for the spectacular implosion of her relationship with Donald Trump, the man she'd defended more fiercely than perhaps any other member of Congress. The resignation, effective January 5, 2026, came after just 1 week of public conflict with the president. 1 week. Greene had spent years as Trump's most aggressive attack dog, defending him through 2 impeachments, election fraud claims, criminal indictments, and countless controversies. She had made loyalty to Trump her entire political identity. Then she broke with him over the Jeffrey Epstein documents, joining a bipartisan push to release files related to the convicted sex offender's network of powerful associates. Trump called it a distraction. Greene called it justice for rape victims. Trump's response was swift and brutal, and he branded her Marjorie Traitor Brown on Truth Social, threatened to support a primary challenger, and made clear that her political career was over if she didn't fall back in line. She folded within days. The resignation statement tried to frame it as dignity, as self-respect, as protecting her family and constituents from a hurtful and hateful primary. But the speed of her collapse told a different story. This wasn't a principled stand. It was a retreat under fire. Greene had built her brand on being the toughest voice in the room, the one willing to say what others wouldn't, the fighter who never backed down. She'd called Democrats traitors, suggested political violence, harassed school shooting survivors, and turned committee hearings into spectacles of confrontation. Now, facing the same treatment from her own side, she was walking away. The political world reacted with a mix of shock and schadenfreude. Democrats saw poetic justice. Some Republicans quietly celebrated losing their most controversial member. MAGA loyalists were divided, some defending Greene's Epstein stance, others seeing her as a turncoat who couldn't handle pressure. But no one delivered a more devastating assessment than Representative Jasmine Crockett. Appearing on CNN's State of the Union that Sunday, Crockett didn't hold back. Her central message was simple and cutting. You're on the other side of the president for 1 week, and you can't take the heat. The irony was impossible to ignore. Greene had spent years dishing out some of the most vicious attacks in modern congressional history. She'd questioned Crockett's intelligence, her authenticity, and even her understanding of Black American struggles. She had made personal attacks on appearances, policies, and character a routine part of her political arsenal. Now, after just 7 days of receiving similar treatment from Trump, she was gone. Crockett's critique landed so hard because it exposed something essential about Greene's political persona. It was all offense, no defense. She could attack relentlessly, but couldn't absorb a fraction of what she'd inflicted on others. The resignation sent immediate shockwaves through the House Republican Conference. Speaker Mike Johnson was already managing a razor-thin majority, and losing Greene, unpredictable as she was, meant one less vote on crucial legislation. The Georgia seat would remain vacant until a special election in spring 2026. But the deeper significance went beyond vote counts. Greene's collapse represented something larger. The first major fracture in Trump's hold over the MAGA movement. If his most loyal soldier could be purged this quickly, this brutally, for 1 week of dissent, what did that mean for the future of Republican politics? Crockett seemed to be asking the same question, but from a very different perspective. Jasmine Crockett didn't waste time with diplomatic language. Sitting across from Dana Bash on CNN's State of the Union, she delivered her assessment of Marjorie Taylor Greene's resignation with surgical precision. You're on the other side of the president for 1 week, and you can't take the heat. One sentence. Complete devastation. The phrasing was deliberate. 1 week did all the work, emphasizing not just the brevity of Greene's opposition, but the pathetic speed of her surrender. 7 days. That's how long Greene's principles lasted when faced with Trump's wrath. Crockett let that sink in before twisting the knife deeper. I was actually surprised, she continued, her tone carrying just enough incredulity to make it sting. Not shocked, not saddened. Surprised? The way you'd react to discovering someone you thought was tough turned out to be remarkably fragile. The subtext was unmistakable. Democrats have been on the other side of the president for years. Crockett herself had opposed Trump throughout his entire political career, faced down his supporters' rage, weathered attacks from his allies in the Congress, and never once considered quitting. Greene couldn't last a week. But Crockett wasn't just pointing out weakness. She was exposing hypocrisy on a scale that bordered on parody. This was the same Marjorie Taylor Greene who'd built her entire brand on being the toughest fighter in Washington. The one who never apologized, never backed down, never showed an ounce of vulnerability. The congresswoman who'd compared mask mandates to the Holocaust, who'd suggested Democratic leaders should be executed, who'd harassed a school shooting survivor on camera, who'd turned committee hearings into performance art designed to humiliate her opponents. That Marjorie Taylor Greene couldn't handle Donald Trump being mean to her for 7 days. Crockett pressed the attack. Now that they're doing it to her, I just got to say, well, why is it that everyone else is able to stand and you can't? The question hung in the air like an accusation. Why can't you stand? It was more than a policy critique or a political disagreement. It was a fundamental challenge to Greene's entire identity. Every tough-talking social media post, every confrontational committee appearance, every time Greene positioned herself as the fearless warrior into fighting the establishment, all of it now looked like cosplay. Crockett's framing was particularly effective because it shifted the narrative away from the Epstein Files debate, which could have made Greene look principled, and focused entirely on her inability to withstand pressure. The substance of the disagreement didn't matter. What mattered was that Greene folded the moment things got uncomfortable, and Crockett made sure everyone understood the contrast she was drawing. She didn't just oppose Trump. She'd face down people like Greene who were constantly fanning the flames of hate while doing it. The difference? Crockett was still there. Still serving her district, still doing her job despite the hostility. Greene had quit. The fanning the flames of hate line was critical. It reframed Greene's entire congressional career not as tough political combat, but as aggressive instigation. Someone who started fires but couldn't handle the heat when those flames turned her direction. Bash tried to steer the conversation toward Greene's stated reasoning, protecting her family, maintaining dignity, avoiding a brutal primary, but Crockett wasn't interested in Greene's narrative. "I serve the people of Texas 30, she said flatly, redirecting to what actually matters, doing the job you were elected to do rather than whatever keeps you in the president's good graces. The implicit rebuke was devastating. Crockett's job isn't to manage her relationship with Trump, it's to serve her constituents. If that means opposing the president, so be it. If it means weathering attacks from colleagues like Greene, she'll weather them." Greene apparently couldn't separate personal comfort from professional duty. What made Crockett's critique so potent was its simplicity. She didn't need complex arguments about policy positions or constitutional principles. She just needed to point out the obvious. Someone who spent years attacking others couldn't handle being attacked for 1 week. It was the political equivalent of a bully finally getting punched back and immediately bursting into tears. And Crockett wasn't letting anyone forget it. The interview clip began circulating immediately on social media, with the 1 week line becoming the defining frame for understanding Greene's resignation, not as a principled stand, not as protecting her family, but as weakness disguised as dignity. Crockett had done something remarkable. She'd taken a resignation that Greene tried to frame as noble and reframed it as pathetic, and she'd done it in less than 2 minutes of airtime. The message was clear, not just to Greene, but to every politician watching. If you build your brand on confrontation, you better be able to take what you dish out. Marjorie Taylor Greene couldn't. Jasmine Crockett could, and everyone knew it. The deeper Crockett dug, the worse it looked for Greene. Because this wasn't just about one resignation or 1 week of conflict. This was about a pattern, a career built entirely on aggression that crumbled the moment aggression came back her direction. Crockett knew exactly what she was doing when she called Greene an instigator. Not a fighter, not a warrior, an instigator, someone who starts problems but can't finish them. The distinction mattered. Fighters engage in combat, knowing they'll take hits. Instigators throw rocks and run when someone picks one up to throw back. Greene had spent her entire congressional career being the latter while pretending to be the former. Crockett didn't have to speculate about this. She had receipts, years of them. Greene had questioned Joe Biden's legitimacy as president. Amplified conspiracy theories about Democratic politicians suggested that devastating wildfires were caused by Jewish space lasers, and repeatedly implied that her political opponents deserved violence. She had made a name for herself by saying the unsayable, doing the unthinkable, pushing boundaries that even her Republican colleagues found uncomfortable. And when Democrats pushed back, when they called her out for spreading misinformation or inciting hatred, Greene doubled down. She fundraised off the criticism. She wore their condemnation like a badge of honor. The meaner they were to her, the tougher she claimed to be, until Trump did it. Then suddenly the same woman who laughed off Democratic outrage, who mocked snowflakes, who couldn't handle tough rhetoric, who built her brand on being politically incorrect, was writing resignation letters about maintaining her dignity and self-respect. Crockett saw the opening and drove straight through it. "Imagine what it is to sit in my shoes," she said during the CNN interview, her voice carrying a weight that transcended the immediate political moment. To not only be on the opposite side of him, but to have people like her who are constantly fanning the flames of hate. The contrast was brutal in its clarity. Crockett, a black woman Democrat in the minority party, had opposed Trump for years, while simultaneously dealing with racist attacks, conspiracy theories about her competence, and constant hostility from MAGA Republicans like Greene. She was still there. Greene, a white woman Republican in the majority party who had been Trump's most aggressive defender, opposed him for 1 week over one issue and immediately resigned. The optics were devastating. But Crockett wasn't just pointing out the contrast. She was forcing a conversation about what it actually means to show political courage. Because courage isn't about how loudly you attack, it's about whether you can stand firm when the attacks come your way. By that measure, Greene had failed spectacularly, and the failure was made worse by the fact that she'd set the standard herself. She'd spent years mocking Democrats as weak, spineless, unable to handle real political combat. She had positioned herself as the embodiment of toughness in a party that prided itself on strength. Now she'd revealed that toughness to be a performance, one that collapsed under minimal pressure. Crockett didn't even need to explicitly call it hypocrisy. The facts did that work themselves. Greene had attacked Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, chasing her through the Capitol and yelling conspiracy theories. AOC didn't resign. Greene had harassed Parkland shooting survivor David Hogg, filming herself following him on the street. Hogg didn't quit politics. Greene had to make Crockett herself a target, insulting her appearance, questioning her intelligence, dismissing her perspective as a civil rights attorney. Crockett didn't leave Congress. But Greene, the self-proclaimed fighter, the woman who claimed to never back down, folded after Trump called her a traitor on social media. The math didn't add up unless you accepted one simple truth. Greene could dish it out, but couldn't take it. Crockett understood something fundamental about political combat that Greene apparently didn't. Real power doesn't come from how viciously you attack. It comes from how effectively you absorb attacks and keep standing. Democrats had been absorbing MAGA attacks for years. Racist conspiracies, death threats, accusations of treason, suggestions they should be executed. They had taken all of it and continued doing their jobs. Greene took 1 week of similar treatment from her own president and quit. The irony was almost poetic. For years, Greene had weaponized victimhood while simultaneously mocking others for claiming victim status. She'd cry about being censored while spreading misinformation. She would complain about being attacked while attacking others far more viciously. She had positioned herself as both the aggressor and the victim, depending on which narrative served her interests in the moment. Now she was trying to do it again with her resignation, framing herself as the victim of Trump's cruelty while also claiming she was making a dignified choice to protect her family. Crockett wasn't buying it. "Why is it that everyone else is able to stand and you can't?" she asked again, the repetition making it impossible to ignore. It was a question Greene couldn't answer without admitting either that she was weaker than she'd claimed, or that the persona she'd built was never real in the first place. Either way, the hypocrisy was exposed. The woman who'd made a career out of being too tough for Washington couldn't handle Washington being tough with her. The congresswoman who'd laughed at triggering liberals was triggered into resignation by her own president. The politician who'd viewed dismissed criticism as proof of her effectiveness was undone by criticism in less than a week. Crockett had successfully reframed the entire narrative. This wasn't about Jeffrey Epstein files or policy disagreements or protecting constituents from a brutal primary. This was about someone finally calling Greene's bluff, and Greene immediately folding. The emperor had no clothes, and Jasmine Crockett had just pointed it out on national television. The tension between Crockett and Greene didn't start with this resignation. It had been building for years, through a series of increasingly personal confrontations that revealed exactly who both women were under pressure. May 16th, 2024. House Oversight Committee hearing. That's when it exploded into public consciousness. The hearing had already devolved into chaos. Republican infighting, procedural disputes, the usual congressional dysfunction, but then Greene decided to make it personal. She looked directly at Jasmine Crockett and said, "I think your fake eyelashes are messing up what you're reading." The room went silent. Not because of the substance of any policy disagreement, but because a white congresswoman had just attacked a black congresswoman's appearance in the middle of an official hearing, using language dripping with racist undertones about black women's beauty standards. Crockett didn't explode, didn't yell, didn't give Greene the reaction she was fishing for. Instead, she waited, Let the moment breathe. Let everyone process what had just happened. Then she asked a procedural question to Chairman James Comer. I'm just curious, just to better understand your ruling. If someone on this committee then starts talking about somebody's bleach blonde, bad-built, butch body, that would not be engaging in personalities, correct? The room erupted. Crockett had done something brilliant. She'd returned fire without technically violating House rules. She never said Greene's name, never pointed at her, just asked a hypothetical question that everyone knew wasn't hypothetical at all. Bleach blonde, bad-built, butch body became an instant cultural phenomenon. Within hours, it was trending on social media. Within days, Crockett had filed to trademark the phrase. Within weeks, she'd launched a merchandise line, B6 products, with proceeds benefiting House Democrats. Greene had tried to humiliate Crockett and instead handed her a viral moment that turned into a fundraising operation. But the exchange revealed something darker than just a catty insult war between congresswomen. Crockett later explained why the eyelash comment wasn't just rude, it was racist. Black women, she pointed out, face constant scrutiny over their appearance. If they wear their hair natural, it's deemed unprofessional. If they straighten it or wear extensions, they're accused of trying to appeal to European beauty standards. If they wear makeup or lashes, they're called fake. It's a trap with no exit, and Greene knew exactly what she was doing when she went after Crockett's lashes. She was questioning Crockett's professionalism, her authenticity, her fitness to be in that room. And she was doing it using a form of attack that specifically targets black women. Crockett handled it with precision and humor, turning Greene's attack into her own victory. But the incident established a pattern. Greene attacks, assumes she'll dominate the exchange, and then gets blindsided when her target hits back harder. It should have been a warning sign. But Greene didn't learn the lesson. Instead, she escalated. August 2025. Greene appeared on Megyn Kelly's show and decided to go after Crockett again, this time questioning her very identity as a black American. She doesn't understand the black American struggle, Greene said, her voice dripping with condescension. The audacity was staggering. Jasmine Crockett had spent her career as a civil rights attorney. She'd worked as a public defender, representing people who couldn't afford legal representation. She'd fought voting rights cases. She'd defended people facing criminal charges in a system stacked against them. Her entire professional life before Congress had been dedicated to understanding and fighting against exactly the struggles Greene claimed she didn't understand. And Marjorie Taylor Greene, a white woman from an affluent family who had never practiced law, never worked in civil rights, never done anything resembling advocacy for marginalized communities, was lecturing her about the black American struggle. The backlash was immediate and fierce. Even some conservatives who generally supported Greene found the comment indefensible. You can disagree with Crockett's politics, they argued, but questioning her understanding of black American struggles when she'd literally built her career on civil rights work was absurd. But Greene's attack revealed something important about her political strategy. She didn't care about accuracy or fairness. She cared about domination, about making her opponents seem small, incompetent, illegitimate. It worked on some Democrats who didn't have the quick wit or thick skin to fire back effectively. It didn't work on Jasmine Crockett. Every time Greene attacked, Crockett either absorbed it without flinching or turned it into ammunition against Greene herself. She never looked rattled, never seemed hurt, never gave Greene the satisfaction of seeing her opponent wounded, and that apparently infuriated Greene even more. There was one strange moment, though. A brief interruption in the hostilities that made their relationship even more complicated. October 2025, Greene posted on social media about looming health insurance premium hikes, warning her constituents about the financial hit they were about to take. Crockett surprised everyone by publicly agreeing with her. "She's sounding the alarm," Crockett said in an interview. She's telling the truth. It's not a conspiracy theory. For a moment, it seemed like maybe, just maybe, these two could find common ground when their constituents' interests aligned. But that detente lasted exactly as long as it took for the next controversy to emerge, because the fundamental dynamic between them hadn't changed. Greene still saw politics as a zero-sum dominance game. Crockett still saw it as public service that sometimes requires working with people you can't stand. One of those approaches requires resilience and maturity. The other requires constant escalation shown and the inability to back down even when you're wrong. Which brings us back to November 2025, and Greene's resignation after 1 week of conflict with Trump. Because the history between Crockett and Greene wasn't just a series of random confrontations, it was a pattern that revealed their fundamental differences in how they handled pressure. Greene attacked Crockett's appearance. Crockett turned it into a merchandise empire. Greene questioned Crockett's understanding of black struggles. Crockett's career as a civil rights attorney spoke for itself. Greene escalated repeatedly, trying to find the breaking point that would make Crockett quit, back down, or show weakness. Crockett never did. And now, when Trump turned even a fraction of that aggression toward Greene herself, she immediately resigned. The contrast couldn't have been clearer. Jasmine Crockett had spent years absorbing attacks from Marjorie Taylor Greene and never once considered leaving Congress. Marjorie Taylor Greene spent 1 week absorbing attacks from Donald Trump and quit. That history, those years of confrontation, gave Crockett's "can't take the heat" critique devastating credibility. She wasn't speculating about Greene's weakness. She'd witnessed it firsthand. November 14th, 2025. That's when it started unraveling. Marjorie Taylor Greene joined 3 other House Republicans, Thomas Massie, Nancy Mace, and Paul Gosar, in voting with Democrats to force a vote on releasing Jeffrey Epstein's sealed documents. The full client list, the flight logs, everything related to the convicted sex offenders network of powerful men who'd allegedly participated in or enabled the abuse of underage girls. It was the kind of issue that should have been MAGA catnip. Exposing elite pedophiles, draining the swamp, speaking truth to power, all the greatest hits. Greene framed it exactly that way on social media, calling it a matter of justice for the women who'd been victimized as children. "These women deserve answers," she posted. "America deserves the truth." Trump's response came fast and cold, a distraction. He dismissed the Epstein files push as a sideshow, irrelevant to his administration's priorities, beneath the dignity of serious governance. The subtext was clear: drop it or face consequences. Greene didn't drop it. For about 48 hours, she held firm, doubled down on social media, defended the vote, insisted this was about principles bigger than party loyalty. Then Trump escalated. On November 16th, he posted on Truth Social, "Marjorie Taylor Brown has gone rogue. Sad." Traitor. Not misguided, not making a mistake. Traitor. He had renamed her, redefined her. In one post, Trump had stripped away the identity Greene had spent 4 years building, loyal soldier, MAGA warrior, Trump's fiercest defender, and replaced it with the worst label in his political vocabulary. And he'd used her maiden name, Brown, as if to symbolically divorce her from her married identity. "You're not who you claim to be. You're someone else now. Someone I don't recognize." The psychological warfare was expert level. Greene tried to weather it, posted defenses of her position, cited her consistent record on Trump's priorities, reminded everyone she'd been with him through impeachments, indictments, everything. Trump didn't care. November 18th, another Truth Social post. "Marjorie Taylor Brown's poll numbers are plummeting. I hear she's at 32% in her own district. Would be a shame if someone primaried her. Actually wouldn't be a shame at all." Now he was threatening her political survival. Not subtly, not as a warning shot, as a promise. And he was using his social media platform, the one with millions of followers who treat his words as gospel, to plant the idea that Greene was already finished. 32%, plummeting, vulnerable. Whether the number was real didn't matter. Trump had said that, so now it existed in the minds of potential primary challengers, donors, and voters. Greene's defensive posts became more frequent, more desperate. She started emphasizing all the times she'd defended Trump, the bills she had introduced supporting his agenda, the interviews where she'd attacked his enemies. She was begging for acknowledgement that she had been loyal. Trump ignored her. November 19th, the MAGA influencer ecosystem, the podcasters, the social media personalities, the grassroots organizers who'd once celebrated Greene, turned on her in unison. It wasn't organic, it was coordinated. They called her a traitor, a snake, a fraud who'd pretended to be MAGA to build her career and then betrayed the movement the moment it became inconvenient. The attacks came from every direction, relentless and personal. Her looks, her intelligence, her motives, her family, everything was suddenly fair game. And Greene, the woman who'd enthusiastically participated in similar pile-ons against other Republicans who crossed Trump, was experiencing it from the inside for the first time. She lasted 2 more days. November 21st, Friday afternoon, Greene posted her resignation letter. It was long, defensive, and dripping with self-justification. She talked about dignity, self-respect, protecting her family from a brutal primary, serving her district's interests. She insisted she'd remained ideologically consistent, and it was everyone else who'd changed. She defended the Epstein files vote, standing up for American women who were raped at 14, trafficked and used by rich, powerful men should not result in me being called a traitor and threatened by the President of the United States, whom I fought for. The sentence was doing so much work, trying to claim moral high ground, position herself as a victim, remind everyone of her loyalty, and push back against Trump's attacks all at once. But the core message was unmistakable. I can't take this anymore. 7 days. That's how long she'd lasted. 1 week from the vote that triggered Trump's rage to the resignation letter that ended her congressional career. Trump's response to the resignation was characteristically merciless. He didn't accept her framing, didn't acknowledge her stated reasons, didn't give her the dignity of retiring on her own terms. Instead, he took credit for forcing her out. Marjorie Taylor Greene resigned because of her plummeting poll numbers and because I told her I would back someone else in the primary, he posted. She could see the writing on the wall. Smart decision, actually. Better to quit than lose badly. Then he twisted the knife. For some reason, primarily that I refused to return her never-ending barrage of phone calls, Marjorie went bad. The image was humiliating. Greene, desperate for Trump's approval, calling him repeatedly, Trump ignoring her, Greene spiraling into betrayal because she couldn't handle being ignored. Whether it was true didn't matter. Trump had created a narrative where Greene wasn't a principled dissenter or a dignified resignation. She was a needy hanger-on who went rogue when she didn't get enough attention. Later that day, reporters caught Trump at Mar-a-Lago and asked if he'd consider reconciling with Greene. Sure, why not? He said with a shrug. I mean, I get along with everybody. I think she's a nice person. Nice person. The most dismissive possible characterization, not fierce warrior, not loyal ally, not important voice in the party. Nice person. Like someone's aunt who brings cookies to church. Harmless, irrelevant, forgettable. But Trump had gone from branding her a traitor to completely neutering her political identity in less than a week. And Greene had helped him do it by quitting instead of fighting. The speed of the collapse was genuinely shocking, even to people who'd watched Trump purge dozens of Republicans from the party over the years. Greene wasn't some moderate who'd always been skeptical of MAGA. She was the truest believer. The most vocal defender, the most willing to go to extremes in Trump's service. If she could be broken this quickly, this thoroughly, what did that say about everyone else in the Republican Party? The answer was obvious and terrifying for anyone who valued independence. There is no amount of prior loyalty that insulates you from Trump's wrath if you cross him, even once, even on one issue, even if you're right. And there is no bottom to how far Trump will go to destroy you if you don't immediately capitulate. Greene had learned that lesson the hardest way possible. She'd attacked Democrats for years, calling them weak and unprincipled for opposing Trump. Now she'd proven that when faced with the same pressure she'd helped inflict on others, she was weaker than any of them. 1 week. That's all it took. When Jasmine Crockett said, imagine what it is to sit in my shoes, she wasn't asking for sympathy. She was issuing a challenge. Because sitting in her shoes meant something specific, something Greene and her MAGA allies consistently refused to acknowledge. Being a black woman Democrat in Congress during the Trump era wasn't just about policy disagreements. It was about surviving a particular kind of sustained assault that combined racism, sexism, and political hostility into something uniquely toxic. Crockett had opposed Trump from day one. Not for 1 week, not on one issue, on everything. And she'd done it while people like Marjorie Taylor Greene weren't just attacking her policies. They were attacking her legitimacy, her intelligence, her authenticity, her appearance, her right to be in the room at all. The eyelash comment wasn't an isolated incident. It was part of a pattern. When Greene went after Crockett's appearance, she was deploying a specific weapon that's been used against black women for centuries. The suggestion that they're somehow not professional enough, not polished enough, not legitimate enough to occupy spaces of power. Too ethnic, too urban, too much. Black women in predominantly white institutions know this game intimately. Every aesthetic choice becomes a minefield. Natural hair is unprofessional. Straight hair is trying too hard to fit in. Makeup is excessive. No makeup is not taking the role seriously. There's no winning, which is precisely the point. The goal isn't critique. It's disqualification. And Greene understood exactly what she was doing when she targeted Crockett's eyelashes in the middle of an official congressional hearing. She was sending a message. You don't belong here. Crockett belonged there more than most. And she'd graduated from Bowie State University, earned her law degree from the University of Houston Law Center, built a career as a civil rights attorney and public defender. She had represented clients who couldn't afford representation, fought voting rights cases, served in the Texas House of Representatives before winning her congressional seat. Her qualifications were unimpeachable. But qualifications don't protect black women from having their legitimacy questioned, which is why Greene's August 2025 comment that Crockett doesn't understand the black American struggle was so breathtakingly offensive. Jasmine Crockett had spent her entire professional life in the black American struggle, representing black defendants in a criminal justice system designed to destroy them. Fighting for voting rights in a state that had pioneered voter suppression, advocating for communities systematically denied resources and opportunity. Meanwhile, Marjorie Taylor Greene had spent her life in northwest Georgia, inheriting wealth from her family's construction company, marrying into more money, and eventually using that financial foundation to launch a political career built on conspiracy theories and racial grievance. One of these women had lived the struggle. The other had profited from pretending it didn't exist. Yet Greene felt entitled to lecture Crockett about what she did or didn't understand. That entitlement, that audacity, is what Crockett was pointing to when she asked people to imagine sitting in her shoes, because the shoes weren't just uncomfortable, they were rigged to fail. Crockett had to be twice as qualified to be considered half as legitimate. She had to absorb racist attacks while maintaining perfect composure, because any show of anger would be weaponized as proof she was too emotional, too aggressive, too threatening. She had to navigate a political environment where her white colleagues could question her intelligence, her authenticity, and her right to be there. And if she responded too forcefully, she'd be accused of playing the race card. Meanwhile, those same colleagues built entire political brands on white grievance politics while insisting racism was no longer a real problem in America. The double standard was exhausting, and Crockett had endured it for years without quitting, without breaking, without giving her attackers the satisfaction of seeing her wounded. That's what made her critique of Greene's resignation so devastating. She wasn't just saying Greene was weak. She was pointing out that Greene couldn't handle 1 week of the treatment Crockett had absorbed for years. And she was doing it without explicitly centering race, which made the racial dimension even more powerful for people paying attention, because Crockett didn't need to spell it out. The contrast was visible to anyone willing to see it. A white woman who'd spent years attacking a black woman's appearance, intelligence, and legitimacy had folded immediately when she experienced a fraction of similar hostility from her own side. A black woman who'd absorbed those attacks while simultaneously opposing a president who'd built his political movement on racial resentment was still standing, still serving, still doing her job. The power shift was undeniable. For years, Greene had positioned herself as the apex predator in congressional politics, the one who could say anything, attack anyone, cross any line. She had weaponized her whiteness, her Trumpism, and her willingness to be cruel into what looked like political invincibility. Turns out it was all performance. The moment she faced real consequences, not from Democrats who she could dismiss as haters, but from Trump himself, she crumbled. And the person standing over the wreckage, calmly explaining what just happened, was the black woman Greene had tried and failed to break. Crockett's "imagine sitting in my shoes" wasn't just about empathy, it was about accountability. She was forcing a conversation that white politicians generally try to avoid. What does political courage actually look like when you don't have the privilege of quitting when things get hard? Black women in American politics don't have the luxury of resignation as dignity. They can't fold after 1 week of pressure and expect to be taken seriously ever again. The barriers to entry are too high, the scrutiny too intense, the consequences of perceived weakness too severe. So they develop resilience that politicians like Greene, who have never faced systemic obstacles to their advancement, can't comprehend. That resilience isn't superhuman, it's survival. And watching Marjorie Taylor Greene try to frame her resignation as strength while Jasmine Crockett continued doing her job despite years of attacks highlighted exactly who had real strength and who'd just been cosplaying it. Greene had built her brand on being transgressive, on breaking norms, on refusing to play by the rules of political decorum. But transgression without resilience is just chaos. And the moment chaos touched Greene herself, she ran. Crockett didn't run. She never had that option. So when she said everyone else is able to stand and you can't, the everyone else carried weight Greene probably didn't fully appreciate. Everyone else included the black women, the immigrants, the LGBTQ politicians, the progressive women of color who had been Trump and Greene's primary targets for years. The people Greene had dismissed as weak, as snowflakes, as unable to handle real politics, they were all still there. Greene wasn't. And that reversal, that complete inversion of who turned out to be tough and who turned out to be fragile, was what made this moment so significant beyond just one resignation. It exposed the fundamental hollowness of MAGA's performative toughness. All the aggressive rhetoric, all the boundary crossing, all the cruelty disguised as strength, none of it translated to actual resilience when the aggression came back around. Jasmine Crockett had known that all along. She'd just been waiting for Greene to prove it. Trump didn't just accept Greene's resignation, he obliterated her legacy in real time. The resignation letter Greene posted on November 21st was carefully constructed, protective, designed to preserve some shred of dignity and future political viability. She'd positioned herself as principled, standing up for rape victims even when it cost her politically. She'd framed the resignation as a choice, protecting her family and district from a brutal primary. She'd emphasized her consistency, claiming she'd stayed true to MAGA values while others had strayed. Trump torched all of it within hours. Marjorie Taylor Greene resigned because of her plummeting poll numbers and because I told her I would back someone else in the primary. One sentence. Complete narrative destruction. Greene wanted people to believe she'd walked away on principle. Trump made sure everyone knew she'd been pushed out in disgrace. She wanted credit for protecting her family. Trump made it clear she was running scared from a fight she knew she'd lose. She wanted to maintain that she'd been ideologically consistent. Trump branded her a traitor who'd gone bad. Everything Greene tried to control about her exit, Trump took from her. And he did it with the casual cruelty of someone swatting an insect. No anger, no disappointment, just dismissive contempt. Smart decision, actually. Better to quit than lose badly. The praise was somehow more insulting than the attacks. Trump was patting her on the head for recognizing that she was beaten. Good girl. You knew when you were finished. The psychological precision was remarkable. Trump understood that for someone like Greene, whose entire identity was wrapped up in being a fighter, a warrior, someone who never backed down, the worst possible fate wasn't being called a traitor, it was being called irrelevant. And that's exactly what he did. For some reason, primarily that I refused to return her never-ending barrage of phone calls, Marjorie went bah! Ed. The image he painted was pathetic. Greene, desperate for his approval, calling over and over her, Trump unbothered, ignoring her. Greene, unable to handle being ignored, lashing out like a spurned admirer. Whether Greene had actually called Trump repeatedly didn't matter. The story Trump told was more powerful than the truth because it reduced Greene from political adversary to needy hanger-on. She wasn't someone whose principles had led her to oppose him. She was someone whose neediness had made her turn against him when she didn't get enough attention. That framing didn't just justify her resignation, it preemptively destroyed any attempt at a political comeback. Because what campaign could Greene possibly run now? The principled conservative standing up to Trump lane? He'd already defined her opposition as petty personal grievance, not principle. The still loyal to MAGA lane? He'd called her a traitor and forced her resignation. That bridge was ash. The independent voice for Georgia lane? She's quit rather than fight for her seat. Trump had foreclosed every possible political future for her in a handful of truth social posts. Then came the reporters at Mar-a-Lago, asking if Trump would reconcile with Greene. Sure, why not? I mean, I get along with everybody. The shrug was audible, even in text. Trump had moved on before Greene had even finished packing her office. She'd have been the most aggressive voice defending him in Congress, and he discarded her faster than old takeout. I think she's a nice person. Nice. Not fierce, not loyal, not effective, not important, nice. The kind of word you use for someone's grandmother or a barista who remembers your coffee order. Harmless, forgettable, irrelevant. Trump had spent a week destroying Greene's political identity, then casually absolved her of significance altogether. And Greene had no recourse. She couldn't fight back without looking like she was still desperate for his attention, proving his narrative correct. She couldn't defend her legacy without reminding everyone she'd just quit. She couldn't position herself as independent without Trump pointing out she'd folded the moment he applied pressure. He'd trapped her completely. This was the same playbook Trump had used on dozens of Republicans over the years. Jeff Sessions, Rex Tillerson, John Bolton, Bill Barr, Mike Pence, anyone who crossed him, no matter how loyal they'd been before, got the same treatment. Public humiliation, narrative destruction, permanent branding as weak, traitorous, or pathetic. But Greene's case was different because she'd been the enforcer. She was the one who'd attacked other Republicans for insufficient loyalty to Trump. She'd mocked Jeff Flake and Bob Corker and Mitt Romney and Liz Cheney for standing up to him. She had positioned herself as the model of what MAGA loyalty looked like. And now Trump had used her as an example of what happens when that loyalty falters, even for a moment. The message to every other Republican in Congress was unmistakable. Your past loyalty means nothing. Your present obedience is all that matters. And if you step out of line, even Marjorie Taylor Greene, the most aggressive Trump defender in Congress, won't be protected. It was a masterclass in authoritarian control. Trump hadn't just ended Greene's career. He'd used her destruction as a warning to everyone else. Look what I did to her. Imagine what I'll do to you. And it was working. Republicans who might have defended the Epstein files vote on principle stayed silent. No one rushed to Greene's defense. No one questioned whether Trump's treatment of her was fair or proportional. They had all learned the lesson. Survival requires absolute compliance. Greene had failed to comply, and Trump had erased her. The speed and totality of it was genuinely shocking. 7 days from dissent to resignation, hours from resignation to complete narrative destruction. Trump had treated Greene the way she'd treated so many others, with merciless cruelty and no regard for past loyalty or future consequences. And Greene, who'd cheered when Trump did this to other people, discovered that watching it happen was very different from experiencing it yourself. She had spent years as the executioner. She had spent 1 week as the condemned. And Trump didn't even have the decency to make it quick. He made it public. Humiliating. Inescapable. He made sure everyone watching understood that this is what happens when you displease him. No matter who you are, no matter what you've done for him before, no matter how loudly you profess your loyalty. 1 week of disagreement erases years of devotion. And the person who'd most enthusiastically enforced that rule for others had just been destroyed by it herself. Jasmine Crockett didn't need to add anything to Trump's kill shot. She had already said everything that needed saying. You're on the other side of the president for 1 week, and you can't take the heat. Trump had just proven her exactly right. And worse, he'd proven that Greene couldn't take even a fraction of the heat she'd spent years inflicting on others. The enforcer had become the example. The attack dog had been put down. And Trump had moved on before Greene's career had finished bleeding out. Strip away the partisan noise, the personal feuds, the viral moments, and what remains is a question that should unsettle everyone. What does political courage actually look like in 2025? Jasmine Crockett provided one answer. Marjorie Taylor Greene provided another. The contrast isn't subtle. Crockett has spent years opposing a president who commanded a movement built partly on hostility toward people like her. She's absorbed racist attacks on her appearance, condescending dismissals of her intelligence, and bad faith challenges to her understanding of the very community she spent her career serving. She hasn't quit, hasn't softened her positions to avoid conflict, hasn't calculated that maybe opposing Trump isn't worth the personal cost. She's still there, still fighting, still representing Texas's 30th district, despite knowing that every position she takes will be met with vitriol from MAGA Republicans who see her as an enemy. That's resilience. Greene, by contrast, built her entire political brand on being the toughest voice in Washington, the one willing to say what others wouldn't, the fighter who never backed down. The Trump loyalist who'd defend him against any attack, no matter how justified. Then Trump attacked her, and she lasted 7 days before resigning. That's not resilience. That's performance art that collapsed the moment it faced real pressure. And the gap between those two responses reveals something essential about modern American politics. A lot of what passes for strength is actually just aggression without accountability. Greene could attack relentlessly because she faced no consequences from the people whose approval she needed. Trump loved it. MAGA voters loved it. Right-wing media loved it. She was rewarded for cruelty, so she kept escalating. But the moment the incentive structure flipped, the moment Trump turned against her and MAGA voters followed his lead, all that supposed toughness evaporated. Because it was never about principles or resilience. It was about performing dominance for an audience that rewarded dominance. When the audience turned on her, there was nothing left. Crockett's courage is different because it's not performative. She's not trying to prove how tough she is. She's just doing the job she was elected to do, even when that job requires opposing powerful people who can make her life miserable. That's the kind of political courage that doesn't get celebrated enough. The quiet, grinding daily decision to keep showing up even when you're outnumbered, outspent, and under constant attack. It's not viral, it's not flashy. It doesn't produce highlight reel moments of confrontation. It's just steady, principled representation of constituents who need someone willing to take the heat on their behalf. And when Crockett looked at Greene's resignation and said, everyone else is able to stand and you can't, she wasn't gloating. She was pointing out a structural truth about who's actually equipped to govern in difficult times. Politicians who derive their power from proximity to a strongman leader will always be vulnerable the moment that leader withdraws approval. Their strength is borrowed. Their courage is conditional. Their principles are negotiable. Politicians who derive their power from serving constituents and standing on consistent values can withstand much more pressure, because their legitimacy doesn't depend on any one person's approval. Greene's resignation illuminated that difference with brutal clarity, but the implications extend far beyond one congresswoman from Georgia. Greene's rapid collapse should terrify Republicans who've convinced themselves that loyalty to Trump will protect them. It won't. She was more loyal than almost anyone, and he destroyed her the moment she stepped out of line. There is no amount of past devotion that insulates you from Trump's wrath. There is no credit bank of loyalty you can draw on when you need to dissent. There is only the question, are you with me right now in this moment on this issue? If the answer is no, you're gone. That's not leadership, that's a protection racket. And it creates a governing environment where the only people who survive are those willing to abandon any principle, any position, any belief the moment Trump signals disapproval. That's how you end up with a Republican Party where Marjorie Taylor Greene, who defended Trump through everything, is purged for 1 week of dissent over releasing Epstein documents. It's also how you end up with a Republican Party that can actually govern, because governance requires compromise, negotiation, and occasionally telling your own side things they don't want to hear. None of that survives in a political environment where the slightest deviation from the leader's position results in immediate destruction. Democrats have watched this dynamic with a mix of horror and schadenfreude. Horror because it represents the authoritarian consolidation of power within a major political party. Schadenfreude because Republicans like Greene enthusiastically built this system and are now being devoured by it. But Crockett's response suggests something more sophisticated than simple satisfaction at watching Greene suffer. She's using Greene's collapse to illustrate what real political backbone looks like, and to remind everyone that Democrats have been demonstrating that backbone for years, while Republicans mock them as weak. The squad members, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, Ayanna Pressley, and Crockett herself, have faced death threats, racism, sexism, and constant attacks from Republicans who question their loyalty to America. None of them quit. Progressive Democrats have opposed party leadership on issues like Gaza, military spending, and health care, despite knowing it would cost them committee assignments and campaign funding. They're still fighting. Black women in Congress have endured racist attacks on their intelligence, their appearance, and their legitimacy from colleagues who should have been treating them as equals. They're still serving. That's the standard Crockett is holding up against Greene's resignation, not a partisan standard, a character standard. Can you take what you dish out? Can you stand firm when standing firm costs you something? Can you do your toe even when the people attacking you have more power than you do? Greene couldn't answer yes to any of those questions. And her failure doesn't just indict her, it indicts the entire performance of toughness that's become central to MAGA politics. The harsh language, the aggressive confrontations, the willingness to cross ethical lines, none of it translates to actual strength when strength is tested. It's all costume. Theater. A show designed to impress people who mistake cruelty for courage. Real courage is quieter, less theatrical, more durable. It's Jasmine Crockett showing up to work every day knowing that Marjorie Taylor Greene might attack her appearance again, and doing her job anyway. It's continuing to represent your constituents even when the President of the United States is actively working against everything you're trying to accomplish. It's absorbing the blows and staying standing, not because you're trying to prove how tough you are, but because you have a job to do and you're not going to let anyone stop you from doing it. That's the standard that matters, and by that standard, Marjorie Taylor Greene failed spectacularly. She failed her constituents, who deserved representation that didn't evaporate the moment things got uncomfortable. She failed her stated principles, which apparently only mattered when Trump agreed with them. She failed the test of resilience that every serious politician eventually faces. And in failing, she proved that Jasmine Crockett, the woman Greene had tried repeatedly to diminish, dismiss, and destroy, was stronger than Greene ever was. Not louder, not more aggressive, not more willing to cross lines, stronger. The kind of strength that doesn't need to perform because it's not dependent on audience approval. The kind of strength that endures because it's rooted in something deeper than partisan loyalty or personal ambition. The kind of strength that democracy actually requires to function. Marjorie Taylor Greene never had it. She just convinced a lot of people she did, right up until the moment she proved she didn't. And Jasmine Crockett made sure everyone understood exactly what they just witnessed. Not a resignation, a collapse, not dignity, weakness, not a principled stand, a retreat under fire. 1 week was all it took to expose the truth. And the truth, as it turns out, was exactly what Crockett had been saying all along. Marjorie Taylor Greene is gone. Jasmine Crockett is still standing. That's not partisan commentary, that's just what happened. One woman built her career on aggression and collapsed under pressure. The other absorbed years of attacks and never flinched. The difference between performance and principle is always revealed eventually. Greene's resignation revealed it in 7 days. The question now, how many other politicians are performing strength they don't actually have?